Okay, so we're on the left side of the guest bedroom here, where the guest bathroom would be, and I'm pulling all this up, but you can see what a weedy, root-ridden mess this is from that stump right there. I've kind of started clearing out this section, so you see it's kind of fairly clean, but then there was that hydrangea tree that was over here, and honestly I don't even think that's a hydrangea root. I think that's coming off of that that stump right there. Sorry, that's not helping. Anyway, I just wanted you to see this. This is already growing into the foundation, and I cut it down in the fall, let it sit here all winter, so that way it would kind of help these smaller roots kind of die off and be easier to take up, which it did a little bit, but these main roots that are going over there are just being a royal pain in the tuchus. So when we bought the house, we had noticed that one or two of these had cracked, and it was from settling, right? And as we talked about in the gutter series, some of this was being overrunning these gutters right here. That's why I had that rain diverter put on, and the rain diverter right there put on, because water was coming down there. So that was a problem. So that's now fixed, and that's good. But I've been talking about this for a while in this series, or in this episode. Let's look right down here. Remember, there's that stump from that big holly tree I said I was taking out of here because I didn't want the roots getting into the foundation and causing issues. And look what we found here. Yeah. And to give you an idea of how big this freaking root is right up against this foundation, right there. Okay, so I'm thinking now that there's two issues with the foundation. Number one, the water issue up there was coming and dropping down here, causing some settling, and, well, let's see. And the one there was dropping down here and causing some settling. And I think partly it was this freaking root getting right up to the foundation, because you can see there's a bundle of roots going right toward the foundation there. We got this big root that is going right here, right? And then I got another big ass root that is coming through here. So you think this is pre-planted or something? Nope. That's where I chopped it off when I was replanting this section over here. So, yay, I got to trace this root out, figure out where it's going, but I can assure you it's probably going right up around here and causing all sorts of havoc. That's not the only root, see? See that vibrating? So we're going right up under here, so yay! You think I've dug this in here? Nope. Watch this. You see it moving a little bit, but so yeah, this is why you do not plant shit like that right up next to your foundation. Put on your rain diverters, make sure it's not overrunning, and keep this away from your house, because this is what I'm thinking is also causing this kind of corner to settle a little bit, is the combination of the rain and that. Yay! Fun times. Now I still got to dig the rest of this crap out. Talk to you later. Bye. Man, the more I pull this fabric back, the worse it gets. This is all going right back toward the house. All this roots flowing right back here. And again, first of all, it's too close to the house. Second of all, because the water was overrunning up here, what was the tree doing? It was going towards water source, right back at the corner of the house. So, I mean, I've got all this to dig out, and it's going to be a pain in the butt. But again, the two issues: wrong tree, water mitigation. It's finding the source of water right at the corner of this house. So now that we're fixing this, we shouldn't have any more problems with settling after all this is done and graded. But I'm not looking forward to getting that out because I'm doing it by hand. Yes, I could hire someone to do it, but I'm a big boy. Okay, later. Bye. Well, that's how much I got out of the out of that one section of the bed over here. And I still haven't even gotten the stump out yet. And that is my goal for tomorrow, is at least get the stump out. So that way after work, the following day I can get all this graded. But got the majority of the roots out. There's still some smaller ones in here, but I dug out all the main roots. So I could probably work on it another hour, but frankly, I am whooped. So I'm going to take a shower and get something to eat and call it a day. Talk to you later. Bye. Okay, so when I bought the house, no one could find the water shutoff valve. So look what I found when I got all the mulch out and started digging out all the roots. You probably saw it in the other video where I was digging out that big root that was right there, but it's right there. The problem is as you can see, as I start backfilling it, it's going to cover this up, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig this whole thing out, and I've got another water shutoff valve. It's the exact same size, but if you look at this lip right here, one will sit down on top of the other and raise it up another 3 inches, which should be about the right height. Now the problem with this one, maybe you can see right there, the problem with this one is that it's got the cutout for the pipe, so the pipe would go through here. However, as I've been feeling around right here, and I know it's hard to see, but right here and right here, they actually cut out or left an opening in the foundation footer for this pipe to go through. So dirt's getting in there, and then dirt's getting back there. So this is heavy duty duct tape. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just tape the living crap out of that. So I don't say that this is gonna be permanent, but for quite a while, it's not gonna allow dirt to get in there, and it'll keep it clean. But right now I gotta dig this whole thing out, clean out the shutoff valve down there, and then put this back. So I'll talk to you in a little bit. Bye.
So do you ever go to somebody's house or go to a museum or whatever, a botanical gardens, and you wonder how they got all the landscaping looking so nice and clean and symmetrical? So let's talk about that. In our first episode, we talked about the radius from the trunk to the drip line, and the circumference being the drip line of the tree. The one thing that we didn't talk about yet is the fact that there's a lot of homes that are slab homes that don't have any kind of crawl space underneath them, or houses that have basements. But there's a good majority of homes that are like mine, that are built slightly off the ground with a crawl space, and in the walls of the home there are these vents, and that allows air to flow from outside to underneath the house and then vent out the other side, and that helps prevent mold and mildew and humidity building up. A lot of the landscaping here was blocking some of these vents, and I see that quite a bit at other homes as well, as these plants have been planted way too close to the home, and they've grown over and they're blocking this natural airflow. So you want to make sure that you have that taken care of, either by trimming it out or just getting rid of it and replanting. For instance, in the front of the house, as you see here, we've got that hydrangea tree that we saw in a couple other episodes, and it is blocking one of the vents over here, and there's a couple on the left side of the house and the right side of the house. Some of those rhododendrons were blocking that airflow. So when you plant, you want to make sure that you look at the plants that you're purchasing instead of just going, oh, cool, that's pretty, without looking at the actual tag. So you know what your drip line is going to be and where to plant, but then you need to add some distance between the drip line and the house. And for plants that are small bushes or whatever, I like to add at least 6 inches of past the drip line. If you're adding a tree, I would go significantly further than that. As far as the species of the tree, there's certain trees that have a very deep taproot without having a very wide root system. Other trees have a shallow taproot and a very wide root system. So if you're thinking about adding trees around your house, it would behoove you to do some research on the tree, not just the circumference around the tree, the drip line, but also what kind of root system it has, especially if you're thinking about planting it anywhere closer than 15 to 20 feet from your house. So we're going to add that. So let's look at what I decided to plant. I'll explain the aesthetics of what I'm doing in a little bit, but we'll just start out with the basics. I'm planting emerald green arborvitaes. They're also called thuja plants. If you look at the back of the tags on these things, they grow to be about 15 feet high. And from the ground to my gutters is almost exactly 15 feet. So I don't think they're going to grow quite that high. I think maybe they'll get like 14 and a half feet. But even if they get 15, it's not going to interfere with the gutter system of the house. It'll be right at the base of the gutter system. It won't even reach over the gutter. So I'm not worried about that at all. And based on the spacing away from the house, they'll never touch the gutters either. So that's number one. The other thing is they're very narrow. So as you see here, it says 2 to 3 feet width. And again, as I mentioned in the first episode, I'm going to always assume that it's going to grow to the maximum. So I'm always going to assume that it's going to go to the maximum of 3 feet in this case. So our radius, we're going to take 3 feet and divided that by 2, and that'll give us 1 foot 6 inches from the trunk of the tree to the drip line. And then as you see, we add 6 inches. I'll plant that no closer than 2 feet from the trunk to the wall. So that will give me the drip line plus 6 inches away from the wall. And if I do get one small branch here or there, I can always prune that back. But that means I won't have to be worrying about it rubbing up against the house, which can cause damage to your house. Me, I have a full brick home, so I'm not worried about it as much unless, for instance, the holly tree got very thick branches, and over time, with wind, it could rub up against that brick and cause damage to the brick. But with these bushes, I'm not going to have that issue. But if you have a house that's wood, that's painted, or vinyl siding, or a hardy plank, over time, if it is rubbing up against the house, it can cause issues. And then on top of that, because there's no airflow getting back there between your plant and the house, it's allowing moisture to build up, which again, you want to wick away moisture from your house. As I've said in multiple episodes, water is not your friend. So yeah, you don't want it rubbing up against your house, and planting it with the drip line plus the additional 6 inches is very good for your home. Let's look at the plants that I'm going to be planting around here. I've chosen autumn sunburst Encore azaleas. So these bloom in the spring, and then they bloom slightly throughout the summer and fall as well. So I always have some nice flowers around the house, which attract bees, I like having bees around because that's a good thing. And this one specifically has a nice coral kind of look. It's not very pinkish. It's got a nice coral in up against our house, which is a whitewashed brick. I think it'll set it off nicely. And then if we look on the back here, we can see it is 3 feet high and 3.5 feet wide. So I'll get into some security stuff in that episode. There's also some reasons I've chosen some of this, at least in the front. And then I haven't planted the sides, left side or the right side, or some of the back. But I am going to be planting that very soon. And what I'm going to be planting will be definitely relevant to the security episode. So I'm not going to get into that just yet. But looking at this, again, it's 3 feet high and 3.5 feet wide. So if we divide that by 2 from the trunk to the drip line, gives us a radius of 1 foot 7.5 inches. So That's what we're going to measure off the wall to see the distance of where we're going to plant. Then we measure out the Arborvitae's radius of 1.6 inches to know where its drip line is going to be, and I'm going to make a mark in the ground, or I did make a mark in the ground. And then I measured out the Azalea's radius of 1.75 inches and added the two together. So I knew that I could plant that as close as 3 feet, 1.5 inches from trunk to trunk. That way I knew where to plant my first plant. And that way, when they're fully grown, they'll kind of meet with the edges of each very close to each other, but not overlapping where it would damage either plant because they are two different species. And I wanted it to look symmetrical. So that brings up the next question is when you go and look at some of these professional landscape jobs, how does it look so nice and even and neat? Well, you don't start on the right side and then work your way to the left, or start on the left side and work your way to the right. You always do the two ends first. So that way you know where they're going to grow together, and you have that idea in mind, right? Now, if you want to create a hedge, you can do that one way. If you just want to plant a couple plants evenly spaced, it's up to however you like your aesthetic. I wanted a nice thick hedge, something that would look symmetrical and almost even all the way across. So what I did was I took the radius of 1.75 inches and I reduced that to a radius of 1 foot and 2 inches. And if I add those two together, it's 2 feet 4 inches. So that gives me a 6.5 inch overlap from one azalea merging into the other azalea, which is not too much, but it creates a tight interlocking hedge that someone would not be able to actually like walk through because it's so tightly integrated. And then the visual aesthetic of how it looks between the two. So what I do is once I have the two outer plants planted, I measure out the radius between one and the other and make a mark in the ground. And then I measure the residual distance between the other two. And the reason I do that is if you look at your house versus my house, the spacing isn't identical, right? So once you measure it out and you divide it by the amount of plants between one and the other, you might end up with a radius that's maybe 1.3 inches, 1.35 inches. Maybe it's, 1 foot, 4 inches. And that way you know what the distance is and you divide it by the number of plants. So that way you can space them evenly between the two. So as they grow together, it looks completely symmetrical. So once I ended up measuring out mine, I had originally set a radius of 1.2 between each plant, 1 foot 2 inches between each plant, which gave me 2.4 inches. Once I measured it out, I actually think it came out to be like 2 feet 2.5 inches between each plant. So it was a little bit tighter integrated, but that gave me a nice symmetrical planting on the center plants. So the edges or the two ends are going to be planted and looking very nice as they grow into the Arborvitaes or grow up to the Arborvitaes, and then the other ones are symmetrically spaced between the two. So again, you take the distance, the radius off of each end plant that you've already done, measure out the distance between those two ends, and then divide by the number of plants, and then you know what your spacing is. And then once it's grown, it'll look like a very nice, tight, integrated hedge. It'll be very nice. So now let's take a look at the house before and after everything's kind of done. Here's a picture of the back as I was doing the back left, and you can see how I've graded it out. There's back in the patio. Once I got all the mulch in, I've got a couple plants back there. There is the back right that is done. Also the back right where that rose bush was, if you remember that from a couple episodes ago, the rose bush is now gone, and I've got a nice grading away from the house. Here is the right side of the house. As I said, I haven't planted it yet. I'm going to be planting it, and I'll get into what I'm planting back here during the security series. There's another view of that. Yes, I know I need to do work on the grass. When I bought the house, it was more weeds than it was grass. So I'm aware of that. One thing at a time. What's on the right, maybe you haven't seen before, but I planted a bunch of fruit trees back here. So on the right-hand side, that square area, I've got 6 strawberry plants. The one right behind it is a apple tree. What's behind that is a very small, working on growing blueberry bush. Beyond that is a peach tree. Beyond that is a blackberry bush. Then I got another apple tree, and then I've got a huge rosemary bush back there. And then kind of on the left, it's dead center back there, there's another peach tree. So the spacing on that is 10 feet between them, so 20 feet between trees. And those will get about 15 feet tall and about 10 feet wide. So it should create some nice shade over that area, but they will not overlap. And since the back area, if you remember from the gutter series where I reoriented you, the back of the yard is the east side of the house, and the front towards the strawberries is the west side. So it gets great full day sun. So we're looking forward to getting some fruit out of there. Then let's see, there is a kind of ground view to show you how I've angled or graded the dirt away from the house down to the edging that I put in. And then here's the front left in front of the garage. That shows you the 2 thujas and the azalea that I've planted there. And let me take a second and talk about this. So as we talked about when we were looking at the left side, when I was pulling that stump out in the other episode, you saw that the roots were going back to the corner of the house. So if you look here, as I've got the drip lines down, you can see I've got it running in front of all the plants, and then between the 2 thujas, I've got one single drip line hose that ends right in the middle of the 2. So what I'm trying to do there, just so you understand, is I'm trying to train the roots of this so that way the roots grow more toward the front of the house, because that's where it's getting its water. If we looked at the last episode, I was showing you how the roots were growing to the back where the water source, where the water was overrunning the gutters. So I'm using water again, but in a positive light, instead of training the roots to grow back toward the house. And they are getting some water with rain, but for the majority of the water, it's on the front side away from the house. So I'm training those roots away from the house. I think we looked at this a couple of times already, as I've shown you what I was, how to plant that front, but I thought I'd show you again. So that's kind of the fully planted, fully graded. And then here's a close-up. I wanted to give you an idea of what those flowers look like. And this is how the house looks like today. So as you can see, it looks fairly sparse compared to the view of how it was when I bought it. And I'm getting ready to show you an artist's rendition of what the house should look like when everything is fully grown. But again, I want to remind you, I'm not a videographer. This is not my full-time job. I am not a Photoshop guru. This picture is absolutely horrible, but this was the best I could do to kind of give you a rendition of what it would generally look like when everything is fully grown. And I want to explain this for a couple of reasons. First, again, I've told you throughout that I like kind of a clean, nice, neat aesthetic to my homes. But I'm also using a bit of artist's license here. So if you're ever into photography or into art, you know the concept of framing. So by putting 3 on the left side and 3 on the right side, and then putting 2 kind of in front of the guest room and 2 at the corner of the garage, I'm framing each section of the house. So it actually makes it look a little bigger. If you're standing on the ground and actually actually looking at it, I'm 6 foot tall. These are going to be growing to 15 feet tall. So you're going to be looking 15 feet up. And in this picture, it doesn't look great. I get it. Again, I'm not a professional at this, but it's actually going to make the house look taller, because if you're actually standing here in front of it, you're looking up. So it's opening that view, which is another artist concept. So I'm framing each section of the house. And here's another visual trick. What I did on the corner of the house is I put 2 at the corner and I put 1 outside. So let me show you that real quick. So if we look at the corner detail from the top down, this is what it would look like. There's the corner of the house with the 3 thujas that are planted there. So 1 is sitting out away from the corner itself, and then 2 are covering the corner. So if we go back and look here at the actual picture, or the artist's rendition, quote unquote, you can see that the corners are covered, but I'm allowing airspace behind there with that 6-inch gap, as we talked about earlier. But because of that, it actually pulls the house out a little bit further to the right and to the left, and it makes the house overall look slightly larger than it actually is. So it adds depth to it, and then it also adds width to it, as well as drawing your eye upward. So those are a few artist concepts I applied to the landscaping here. And lastly, the benefit to doing all this is, as we saw on the front left, which is the guest bedroom where I took out that holly tree, I have stopped or prevented any damage to that corner. Houses in general are going to settle as the home ages. That's absolutely normal. We just don't want any abnormal settling where it settles at one corner versus the other. It's settled just a tad bit, and there's no permanent damage to the house, and there won't be, because we didn't let this go on another 20 years. So absolutely happy with how that's turned out between the rain diverters and getting rid of that tree and regrading it. That there's no damage to the house now, and we're preventing any damage to the house in the future. 2 little squares that need to be replaced is just easy with no permanent damage to the rest of the structure. So let's take a quick look at the before when I bought the house, and my quote-unquote artist rendition of what it'll look like in a couple years after the plants get a chance to grow. Thanks for watching. Catch us in our next episode. Talk to you later. Bye.